Loving greetings and pranams, dear divine friends in God and Guru. So here we are at the end of the week of convocation. It's hard to believe, isn't it? It seems like a few moments ago that we were just beginning out on this wonderful, wonderful week-long journey, but here we are, and what a feeling. What a feeling. I feel from all of you, and I feel in my own heart such a powerful love and a sense of the divine friendship that we share on this unbelievable and incomparable path of God realization. And I want to say the messages, the appreciation that so many of you have expressed this week, this is deeply touching to all of us who are involved here at the convocation. And your goodwill, your receptivity that's behind that goodwill, it has this effect. It strengthens in my heart the one desire that I feel, and that is to please my Guru and to serve him in all of you. Because, this world is a terrible place, isn't it, if we don't feel the companionship of God in our souls. And so that's why, with all the urgency of my heart and mind, I want to do everything in my power to help you to forge and to maintain that personal link that each of you feels, that personal link with the amazing and unceasing flow of divine blessings and help that pours from God and Guru to each one of you through the teachings, through the techniques, through your practice of the teachings and techniques of this SRF and YSS path. So let me just say, even though this week of convocation is coming to an end, I want to say to each of you, on behalf not only of myself, but of all the monks and nuns in our YSS and SRF ashrams, that it is certainly not the end of our efforts, our desire to do whatever we can to help each one of you. And through our meditations, through our prayers for you, through whatever spiritual service we can perform to help our Guru bring you to that bliss, that security, that eternal freedom of God realization. And I don't mean only the monks and nuns. Let's take just a moment to say a grateful word about the literally hundreds of wonderful lay disciple volunteers. They play such a vital role in each year in helping the monastics to bring this convocation to you and to the world. They help with the overall coordination, and then there's special teams, different parts of the world even, that they also take care. Let me just mention a few of the things that they help with. Of course, there's the convocation website, which is the virtual hub of all of the activities of the week. And then we have a wonderful team in many different languages that prepare the subtitles on the talks and that they translate those subtitles so that people can participate in many, many different languages. And then we have our international help desk, and I know lots of you have really come to rely on that, and because they provide 24 hours a day, 7 days a week throughout the convocation, one-on-one assistance. They're always there to help whoever needs assistance in connecting or getting their participation set up. Then, of course, we have the many, many ushers and the technical staff who make possible our online meditation room. That's been such a wonderful feature in between the other activities. And also, lastly, and certainly not least, let me just mention with thanks to the wonderful and talented film crews, the ones who created the virtual pilgrimage tours, to all of the ashrams, Mother Center, Encinitas, Hollywood, Lake Shrine, all of those sacred places that our Guru founded, which so many of you have enjoyed. And I think most of you, that the role of these SRF and YSS lay disciples, the volunteers who serve, this has really expanded in very significant ways over the past 2 years, not just in developing our online convocation, which we had for the first time last year, but also helping in so many other ways throughout the year. Many of them are members of our Voluntary League of Lay Disciples that I told you about in June of this year. And this is just the beginning. So let me just take a moment to say to all of you wonderful servitors of God and Guru, let me convey my deepest thanks. And can I ask all of you, the thousands of you who are participating in your 130 countries around the world, don't you join me in that gratitude? Yes, nod your heads. I can't see you through the camera, but I can feel, and I know that those who serve can feel your gratitude and your help. Wonderful. So our program for today has a title, Finding a Spiritual Compass in Our Changing World. Well, we look back over this last year or two, and the variety, the challenges, the events, they have really kept us on quite a roller coaster, haven't they? So I thought I would begin today and just share a little story with you, told by our Guru Paramahansa Yogananda. And this was his little recounting of the first time that he ever went on a roller coaster. This happened about a year or so after he arrived in Boston, around 1921 or 22. And of course, by that time there had been like a fairly small but devoted, enthusiastic group of students that attended the classes and so on that he conducted there in Boston. So one day, some of those students invited him to go on a little outing to an amusement park in Boston. And this was a first for him, like so many other things that we can't even imagine how many things were firsts and completely unfamiliar for him during that first year when he arrived in this country from India. But anyways, here's what he recorded about that incident, expressed in his inimitable way. And he talks about this one student who was with him there. He just gives the initial of his name, calls him Mr. G, G period. So Guruji says this. He says, once in Boston, I remember having been unwillingly compelled to enjoy the roller coasting stunt. He said, come on, Swamiji, have a ride, Mr. G asked me. I just went. And Guruji says, God only knows my impressions and introspective thoughts. My introspective thoughts, when that little rattling car would make a nosedive almost perpendicularly down. All I remember, though I wasn't afraid, was that I much preferred to withdraw my consciousness from the body and go into samadhi, and thus avoid this particular sensation of a succession of nosedives. And then he says, Mr. G was shouting, hooray, hooray, at the top of his voice. And he was in high glee during this singular experience of mine. And then at last, after hours or centuries it seemed, the car stopped. "How did you like it? Wasn't it wonderful?" To his repeated inquiries, I eventually just replied, "Yes, yes, yes, yes," thinking of the proverb, "Let bygones be bygones," and that everything was over. But Mr. G, being overpowered by an extra dose of high glee, failed to notice my serious views about roller coasting. And he said, "Come on, Swamiji, there's a bigger one and a better one." Saying this, Mr. G just dragged me along. I was speechless. Like a meek lamb led to the slaughterhouse, I went, inwardly resigning myself to God and saying within myself, "Lead thou wherever thou wilt." So it's a charming story, and I think very symbolic, really, of what he was going to be experiencing really for the whole next 30 years. After leaving the peace and the familiar environs of his native India and launching himself on this unbelievable roller coaster ride in order to bring the teachings of meditation, the teachings of Kriya Yoga to all of us in the world. And like with all incidents in our Guru's life, there's some real important lessons, valuable lessons that it gives to each of us. And first, of course, I'm sure all of us would very much like the ability to go into samadhi at will whenever we had a frightening experience or outer conditions got a little bit too challenging. That would be pretty good, wouldn't it? And but while we're working on that advanced accomplishment, a second lesson comes from his attitude at the end. And he said he may have felt like a lamb going to the slaughterhouse, but inwardly his attitude was one of complete childlike trust in the lamb owner. The lamb owner. He exemplified what he taught. Make the Lord the shepherd of your soul. Make the Lord the shepherd of your soul. And to those who came to him for help in navigating the roller coaster of their own lives over the years in this really unpredictable modern world, he had this to say. He said, "The world will go on like this in its ups and downs. Where shall we look for a sense of direction? Not to the prejudices roused in us by our habits and the environmental influences of our families, our country, or the world, but to the guiding voice of truth within." Doesn't that lead in a nice way to the topic for today, of finding a spiritual compass in today's world? So, how do we go about finding that compass? How do we develop that ability? I really have two answers for you today. And they're a little different, but the first one is this, that I would suggest to direct your attention to this beautiful and enduringly inspiring video of our revered Sri Dayamata that we posted on our YouTube site some months ago. It's called A Promise of Light. And it was a talk that she gave at the closing program, the closing talk of Convocation many years ago, back in 1993. And the reason I mention this is because even though she gave that talk almost 30 years ago now, the guidance she gives about the difficulties, the darkness our world is going through, and the causes for it, but most of all, the solution to it, all of that in the way she expresses, it's amazingly pertinent to what we're going through today. So I encourage you to view that talk. If you haven't done so recently, it's still there on our YouTube channel, A Promise of Light. And then the second answer to how do we find this spiritual compass in today's world, This is a very personal answer, and it's very unique to each one of you individually. Because I would say finding that compass, it's the accumulation of all the soul whispers, the insights that you have, you might say, bookmarked for follow-up while participating in the classes and meditations and workshops throughout the week. In other words, what we're talking about is that transmission of spiritual consciousness that has flowed as guidance for your own life from God and Guru directly and individually into your souls during this week. And the secret of having a spiritual compass to guide us as we go forward, I would say it simply comes down to just this, is to keep that soul connection, to keep that spiritual transmission alive, dynamic, living. Are you ready to do that? I think you're ready. Master gave an amazing description in a few words about the ability for the soul power, the soul's power, I should say, to guide us through the twists and turns of life. He put it like this. He said, when you are in direct contact with the creator of this universe, you are in direct contact with all wisdom and understanding. And he said, understanding, this was a quality that he emphasized so much in his personal training of disciples. Monastics in the ashram and lay members who followed the path, that quality of understanding, the purity of heart is another way of saying it. But he said, understanding is the vision of your inner being, the sight of your soul, the telescope of your heart. Understanding is your inner vision, the intuitive faculty by which you can clearly perceive the truth about yourself and others and all situations that arise in your path, and then correctly adjust your attitudes and actions accordingly. Isn't that beautiful? If we could have that connection, if we could have that access to such an inner soul compass, what security, what inner assurance we would find when that soul compass is operating as it should. Now let me ask you, have you ever tried to find your way through a unfamiliar territory, or a road trip you might be on, or some place that you just don't really know your way around, and you're in the midst of a dense fog, a mist? It's not so easy, is it? And yet in the same way, too often we try to find our way through life while enveloped in brain fog, or even worse, soul fog. I think most of you know, you've heard that term, brain fog. You know that feeling when your body and your mind are just not functioning very well. There's dullness or low energy, maybe a lack of focus, a lack of acuity, inability to concentrate, forgetfulness, maybe even a low-grade depression. Brain fog. So in a similar way, we have to realize that an unhealthy mind, an emotionally immature or uncontrolled mind, produces what we could call soul fog. Soul fog. Paramahansaji said this. He said, restlessness, that which ruffles and diffuses the mind, it blurs vision and causes misunderstanding. Emotions blur your vision. Moods blur your vision. And he said most people act not out of understanding, but according to their moods. According to their moods. All of these series of feelings and emotions, anger and fear and so on, that the uncontrolled mind imposes on us. So Guruji says, in my experience with the great ones in India, the first thing I learned was to clear my vision of all forms of restlessness and mental prejudice that might blur my understanding. Now, I can tell you, in my own early years in the ashram, I had, shall we say, lots of opportunities to apply this, believe me. But I found this. I found the greatest help in the technique of Kriya Yoga. The technique of Kriya Yoga, and along with that, cultivating a personal relationship with the Guru. That burns away the fog that surrounds the soul. Clears it away. And I remember very vividly the first time that I really understood its power. As many years ago, I was going through a period, I was feeling really quite depressed and out of tune. I couldn't feel any real devotion or any enthusiasm or interest for God. God seemed far away. Just wasn't there. You know, now don't think that those who live in an ashram don't have those struggles. I assure you, everyone on the spiritual path goes through this. So one day when I was feeling this way and I didn't like it, I wanted to get out of it. So I resolved I'm going to dedicate one whole day just to silence and meditation. So I sat down, meditated, great resolve, great motivation, doing Kriya Yoga for a long time, 108 repetitions. And I recall suddenly, only way I can describe it is my spine came alive. My spine came alive, and I could feel it just sucking the energy in from the body, from the senses, from the outer instruments. And with each Kriya, there was such joy, just as Guruji described, such joy in the spine, greatest joy I had ever felt. And then after I finished practicing Kriya, I just sat there in the silence for a long time, just enjoying that feeling of joy. And I remember then, after a while, I began to talk to Master. And I remembered the trouble, the negative mood, the lack of devotion I had been experiencing. And I just said to him, I asked him, how can I feel a greater and more consistent desire for God? And the answer was instant. It came right away. It came like this, forming this intuitive answer in my mind. Do you remember that wonderful bliss that you felt while practicing Kriya? Now, do you think that was a result of just performing a technique? No way. No. That is a result of drawing closer to me. A first glimpse of what I am. This had a very powerful impact on me, and instantly I saw how desirable, how vital is that friendship that we can form with God and Guru. And instantly my resolve deepened to draw closer to Guru by talking to him, asking for help with my difficulties, listening with receptivity to the responding guidance that would come. That's how God becomes real. That's how God becomes personal, a real spiritual compass for our lives. Now, we can imagine what a difference we will see in the world at large, as more and more people learn how to use the science of Kriya Yoga, to free themselves from those moods, those ungoverned emotions that obscure the soul. It's really, it's a thrilling, optimistic prospect and a very necessary development. Because Master had this to say. He said, the overall quality and character of any community, any civilization, is produced by mass karma. The accumulated effects left in the ether by the populace at large. He said, each individual is responsible for contributing to the mass karma, which in turn influences every individual. And the person who keeps himself or herself cleansed of all wrong vibrations, that person produces a powerful uplifting effect on all the contemporaries. So, as we come to the close of this blessed week of Convocation, that's what I'm reflecting on. And I'm thinking with great love of all of you, because I remember something that our revered Mrinalini Mataji said one time. On one occasion when she was speaking to it was the lay disciple group at our Hollywood temple. That lay disciple group that was started many years ago and now has been introduced for Kriya Bonds all over the world, not just in the Hollywood temple area, as the Voluntary League of Lay Disciples. So Mrinalini Mata said this. She said, looking out over that group of dedicated disciples that had gathered, she said, the divine vibrations that go out from all of you, from your meditations, from your prayers, from your selfless service in this sacred temple, in this sacred center, your loyalty, your devotion to Gurudev and furthering his work, she said, this creates a tremendous spiritual power in this world. Tremendous spiritual power in this world. And then she went on, she said, there's no way that this world is going to change through politics, through isms. The only way that the world is going to change is when individuals change. When God is allowed to come back into his own world. He created it, she said. He created it. He put himself within each one of us. And then mankind put him, first of all, out of the heart, then out of the mind, and now out of the world. But then she said, as long as he lives, even within a few, that is a tremendous power. That is the power of God. That is the power of Guru living within you. So there we have it. The world will change as individuals change. And I think back and, in all my years of spiritual study and spiritual practice, never ever did I find a teacher or a teaching that's as thorough as our Guru's SRF and YSS path when it comes to the science of changing ourselves. And in one sense, we can express that very simply, just like this. We become what we concentrate on. We become what we concentrate on. So that's why I have such admiration and such gratitude, really, for all of you who have devoted your time this week to concentrating reverently in a spirit of discipleship on Paramahansa Yogananda and his teachings. May that concentration produce on this path more and more realized disciples, more Dayamatas, more Rajarsis, Jnanamatas, Anandamoys, Mrinalini Matas, Bhaktanandas, the list goes on. And I want to add the names of each one of you who is making that effort. You can do it. That's why Guruji brought this fellowship. That's why he brought this worldwide Sangam and this amazing sadhana, this life, way of life of spiritual discipline, meditation, and anchoring our lives in God. You know, often I know I felt this way for many years until it was corrected, not just once, but many times. That, we look back on that, what we might think of as the golden era, when Guruji was here in the body and able just to give his personal touch, his personal encouragement, his personal training to the disciples. But let me tell you, I recall so clearly how often Dayamata would say this to us. She said, no disciple should ever think for a moment that Guruji is no longer physically, since he's no longer physically present, he's unaware of the needs of each one who enters into that Guru-disciple relationship with him. She said, I know for a fact that he is giving to you the discipline and the spiritual training you need each day of your lives. And years ago, he said to me, he said, when I have left this physical form, I will be with you more than I ever was in this lifetime. When I have left this physical form, I will be with you more than I ever was in this lifetime. And Ma said, I have found that to be true. And he didn't say that only for me, but for all his disciples who would come after his passing. There was one monk who came into the ashram about the time when I did, a little before actually. And this devotee got in the habit of, when he was walking around the grounds there at Encinitas, where we all began our spiritual training as monks, he got in the habit of just picking up every little piece of trash, little litter or, little pieces of trash whenever he saw them around the grounds. And that was it was his way of doing this act of devotion, act of service to the Guru. And even though, the monks and the devotees there were very conscientious about keeping the grounds clean and sweeping every day and so on, but, there's always little pieces that the brooms would miss. So one time he passed a little piece. He was walking somewhere. He saw a little tiny piece of trash, but he just kept on walking. And he thought to himself, this is really pretty silly. No one sees me doing this, and it's probably foolish of me to think that Master even cares. I don't feel any inspiration. I don't feel his presence. Here I am, just this one little devotee out of hundreds or thousands or millions. He probably doesn't even notice me. He probably doesn't even know that I exist. And on and on. You know how the mind goes? Does that sound familiar? Script in the minds of some of you out there? I know it does for me. So he didn't pick it up. He left it there. But then after he went on just a few steps, his conscience started to bother him. And he thought, well, might as well. And he went back and he picked up that little piece. It was tiny. Just like your thumbnail. He picked it up and turned it over. And on the other side of that piece of paper, there was a picture of Master smiling sweetly at him. What can you say? Personal connection. That transmission. Personal connection, personal relationship. All the little things that we do to maintain that dynamic link, to maintain the flow of that spiritual transmission of divine consciousness. We can do it if we look for the ways, if we look for the opportunities. That's the spiritual compass that we're talking about. And let me tell you, today, that devotee continues to serve Master and SRF in a major way. Major way. Now, even though that devotee in that story with the piece of paper, he was probably in his early 20s. But I want to say this, that promise of transformation, that promise of personal spiritual transformation that our Guru and his teachings brings to us is just as much for our elder citizens on the path. You know, Sri Gyanamata, one of the great advanced disciples of our Guru, you can read her wonderful wisdom and encouragement in that book, God Alone. She was already in her 60s. She was an elderly lady when she came to the ashram to live here at Mount Washington. And yet, by the end of her life, she had achieved complete liberation, complete freedom. Doesn't have to come back for future reincarnations. Guruji was there, and he told those disciples around him, she's free. You know, it depends not on our age, but on our willingness. Now I have a letter I thought you might like. I received it just this last week, and the devotee who wrote it gave me permission to share it. So along these lines that we're talking about, she wrote, Dear Brother Chidananda, I'm a devotee of 40 plus years, in my late 70s, and I have very few living relatives. My husband of 5 decades died about 7 years ago. I lost my older daughter in 1990, and so my family consists of my just one younger daughter, 2 grandchildren, a great-grandson, and 2 cousins. That's it. And I've often thought that if my karma required me to end this incarnation soon, you know, I'd be okay with that. Until I started reading the new lessons, underlined. And then she goes on, she says, they're so full of deep wisdom and profound ways to change our lives and raise our consciousness. Sometimes I feel like I'm reading secrets that were only available to the high priests and scholars, things that were never intended to be available for ordinary people like myself. And then she said, thanks to all the new material in these lessons, I have come to fully believe I can really find God in this lifetime. All I have to do is be here so I can read them and put them into practice. You know, she went from thinking, well, maybe my life now has run its course, time to be looking on to the next one. She says, no, now there's so much more waiting for me. All I have to do is be here and put them into practice, which, she said, translates into making a more serious commitment to maintaining my physical health and well-being. And heaven knows Master provides all the tools I need for that. So she concluded and said, this letter is really my song of gratitude to SRF for making this latter stage of my life a time of boundless growth and ever deeper love for God and our Gurus. I give thanks every day for the ones who forged this path, and for those of you who so generously devote your lives to making it available to the world. I send you more love and thanksgiving than I can ever express. Isn't that beautiful? And part of what makes it beautiful is that, you know, when we receive a story like this, when one devotee puts an experience like this into writing, we can be absolutely confident that this is multiplied many, many, many times. Many devotees all over the world who are echoing that that sentiment, that gratitude, that enthusiasm. So when she talks about the depth of gratitude, the depth of thankfulness for all those who are helping to make the teachings, make the path that our Guru brought available to the world. Again, I want to come back to what I said at the beginning. As I mentioned, our dear lay disciple volunteers around the globe, so many are contributing immensely to that effort. Immensely. Just one example, a few weeks ago, we were able to launch the Italian translation of the new SRF lessons. This is the first one, the first edition in a non-English language. And I want to read another passage again. I hope you don't mind me doing more reading of this, but these are so wonderful that they're meant to be shared with all of you. So this was sent to one of the monastics who was coordinating the work of this translation project here at the Mother Center. This devotee wrote, "I just wanted to share with you the joy of communicating the imminent launch of the Italian lessons to the small group of devotees that we contacted for the final user testing. They were like children in a toy store on Christmas Eve. And there was one lady in particular who knows no English at all, who could not contain her tears because her heart was so full that she started sobbing. And she said, 'Oh, I can't believe this. I've been waiting for more than 30 years for this moment.' Her sentiment is shared by many, many, many devotees in Italy. Those of us who have no problem reading English and have always had easy access to our Guru's life-altering wisdom will probably never comprehend the depth of their gratitude and awe at receiving this gift of Master's lessons after so many years on the path." Now, in the next few years, I think we're going to see many, many more celebratory experiences like the ones that those dear divine friends in Italy are having now. I'm told that we're making great progress with the new lessons in, Spanish, Portuguese, Thai, German, Russian, Japanese, and French. These are all in process, hopefully over the next 2 or 3 years. And same with the Indian languages. The work is going on in Hindi language, Tamil, Telugu. More languages I'm sure will come later. So again, deepest thanks to those dear devotees and to the members of our Voluntary League of Disciples who do so much for our Guru's worldwide family. When we think about this and we stop just for a moment and visualize the incredible chain of links, one soul to another, in so many countries around the world, that links of that divine friendship, of that shared discipleship. That's what it is, shared discipleship that unites us around this divine path, around our divine Guru and his teachings and techniques. What a life it is. What a life it is. How can we not just be in awe of the blessing that our past karma and the grace of God and Guru have laid in our path this time. So as we look forward to those wonderful new lessons, being born in all those different languages, on that note, let me just close with these words that Paramahansaji, our Guru, wrote to his students many years ago. I quoted part of this at our opening program, but I wanted to save the complete message for now. Dear ones, he said, the power of truth is secretly spreading in different lands. Like the rising dawn, it is creeping all over, pushing the darkness away. Hold on to love, truth, meditation, and service. Think of nothing but the light, and the gloom of ignorance shall disappear. Ignorance must go first from within us, and then it disappears without. The power of truth has been proved to you. Hold on with faith everlasting in the teacher, the teaching, and God. You shall see the goal. Lo, it is there right before you. So here we are. I'm reluctant even to say these words. Here we are at the end. But here we are. Guruji said, be a divine realist. Well, we can manage that much realism, I guess. But, I'm sure many of you over the years have treasured the memories of past convocations. You remember where we all look forward at the conclusion of the convocation. So often we would be blessed by a visit from our beloved Sri Dayamata or Sri Mrinalini Mata. They would come there to the gathering at the hotel in downtown Los Angeles, and they would share their love, their wisdom, their counsel, often on the theme of how to take convocation home with you. But this year there's one big difference. You already took convocation home with you. So what are we going to do? I'll just say this, that in the weeks and months ahead, come back often. You can dive into the classes, into the guided meditations, the kirtans, those wonderful kirtans that we've all enjoyed this past week. It's all going to be there for you. Come back as many times as you can. Take full advantage of in addition, the marvelous spiritual resource that Guruji has given us in these new SRF and YSS lessons. And as well, make the power of group meditation and study a regular part of your schedule. You can attend, of course, one of our temples or meditation groups around the world in person, or if you don't live near one, then there's that wonderful online meditation center maintained both by SRF and then the one by YSS. So in all of these ways, you can maintain that living connection between your soul and the divine, between your soul and the Guru that God sent you to take you by the hand and walk you step by step back to Him. That's that ongoing transmission of spiritual consciousness. That's the whole secret. That ongoing transmission of spiritual consciousness that is the ideal spiritual compass that each one of us needs. And that gives each one of us, I don't know how to explain it, a bedrock of inner assurance, security that nothing in this world can ever defeat. So before we close for today, can we meditate together just for a few moments, one last time? Sit up in the meditation posture. Close your eyes, lift the gaze to the Christ center, the Kutastha Chaitanya center at the point between the eyebrows. Fix the mind and the heart on that divine resolve, that divine enthusiasm that has been growing and collecting and gathering in our hearts and our minds and souls throughout this past week. Feel that glow, feel that presence, feel that divine connection. Now in that inner temple of divine communion, let us join together in a closing prayer. Again, as we invoke the names of God and the great ones, with each utterance of those names, let your heart and mind forge that living connection with their divine presence. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, our Guru Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, we bow to you all. Beloved God, beloved Guru, be the pole star of our lives. Guide us on all the twists and turns of life in this material world. Fill our hearts with thy love. Fill our minds with thy wisdom. Fill our souls with thine ever-new joy. Bless us that we always maintain that living connection with your guidance, your wisdom, your love, your protection, your joy. And beloved God, may thy love shine forever on the sanctuary of our devotion, and may we be able to awaken that love in all hearts. Om. Peace. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Amen. Love and blessings to each one of you, my dear brothers and sisters in God and Guru, until we meet again. Jai Guru, God bless you all.